The worst year for a lot of us for our mental as well as physical health. So joining us this morning is best-selling author, coach Lisa Goldenthal.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa G, your host. You're at the top of your game, yet the game is changing faster than ever. Strategies that got you here aren't the ones that'll keep you here. The pressure is relentless, and the fear of obsolescence looms large. That's why I'm here. Welcome to the new podcast series, Disrupted: How to Be Gritty and Unlock Performance in Business, Mindset, Wellness, and Success to help you master disruption.
Thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon.
Today, I'm joined by an award-winning investor, founder of Paddington Capital Management, and author of the new book, Capital Offence: Why Some Benefit at Your Expense. With more than 30 years of managing billions in assets, he is pulling back the curtain on how central banks, government policy, and financial systems quietly drain wealth from ordinary people while enriching a select few. His Paulitical Economy, a perspective, makes complex economics simple, relatable, and actionable. I'm so excited to welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G, Paul Musson.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here.
It's so great to have you here. I want to talk about your book. Such a great title. Capital Offence argues that ordinary people are losing wealth through systems stacked against them. What first opened your eyes to this problem in the first place?
Yeah, so, I'll start off by saying that I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I mean, it might be, but I don't think it is. And that those in charge didn't mean to get us to this place.
Okay.
That it was good intentions gone bad. And it was a result of taking the easy path, the popular path, and just thinking or considering first order effects of your actions rather than second and third order effects, which are further down the line and usually not as much fun to think about because there are consequences. And I kind of liken it to, you want a cheeseburger. Well, the first order effect is, wow, that tastes fantastic. Well, second and third order effects, well, you're starting to pack on the pounds a bit, if you're doing it on a regular basis. But nobody wants to think, well, I mean, not nobody, but we don't like to think about that. So now I got that out of the way. When I first started noticing this, I guess was in the early 2000s when, and these are my opinions, that, and not just my opinions, but others, that central banks appeared to shift from focusing on monetary policy that resulted in the strongest economy to instead shifting to monetary policy that favored asset prices. So they seem to be targeting asset prices, stock markets, and housing, and driving those asset prices higher with the assumption that over time, all the benefits of that would trickle down to everybody else. Well, they haven't, and they won't.
Right.
And so, and the reason they do this is that they think that, well, there is such a thing as a wealth effect. Now, there's a real wealth effect, and there's a fake wealth effect. So the way a free market system is supposed to work is that you create capital, such as your podcast, your show. You're creating capital, and it doesn't come at anybody else's expense. You created it pretty much out of nothing, out of your own experience and your desire and your drive and your knowledge and your intelligence, and nobody else paid. It didn't come at anyone else's expense.
Right.
And then your listeners will consume the capital that you produced. And that is the way a free market system is supposed to work, that we all create capital and then
Yeah.
we voluntarily exchange that capital with each other, and we do it through money, right? Nobody is coerced into doing anything. And so it's not a net zero sum game where you can only benefit if somebody else loses,
Ah, right.
right? That is more like a game of poker. So at a game of poker, at the table, there's no capital being created. There's a redistribution of capital at the poker table. And at the end of the game, what you end up with is one winner and a bunch of losers.
Right.
For your listeners, this should start to sound increasingly familiar because this is what is starting to happen in the economy, where some people are making money at the expense of others.
Right.
And it is affected primarily through monetary policy. So the example I give is, let's say you make a bike, you create capital, and I make a suit. I've created capital. And then we fairly exchange a bike for the suit. And again, it didn't come at anybody else's expense. But we
Right.
don't have direct exchange barter system. Instead, we have indirect exchange. So to get my suit, you won't directly give me the bike. You will first sell your bike, and then you use the money to buy my suit. That's indirect exchange.
Okay.
Okay, so again, a bike and a suit were created out of nothing, didn't come at anybody else's expense, and we're both better off. Now you've got a suit, I've got a bike. That's great. So the trouble starts when you introduce money into the system. So let's say you make 10 bikes, and they're very nice bikes, about $1,000 each. So you sell them, and now you've got $10,000 in your bank account.
Right.
What that $10,000 represents is the bikes that you created, the capital that you created, and you are temporarily storing the capital of your 10 bikes in that $10,000 of money, right? So
Got it.
when you go and spend your $10,000, what gave you the wherewithal to go purchase something was the fact that you created 10 bikes. That gave you the means of payment. That's what enabled you to go out and spend your $10,000. So before you get a chance to spend your $10,000, if you assume that the central bank doubles the money supply, when the central bank prints money, that's what they do. Well, they press some buttons and create them digitally out of nothing, out of thin air. They
Right.
didn't create any capital to obtain that money. They just created it out of thin air. So it has no capital stored up in it until it enters the system and it extracts capital from the rest of the money already in existence. So as soon as that central bank doubles the money supply and it comes into the economy, it takes 5 bikes from your $10,000. So on your bank statement, it says that you still have $10,000, so you still think you're doing okay. But your $10,000 now only contains 5 bikes instead of 10. And so now your $10,000 will only buy half as much as it would have done before the central bank doubled the money supply. Everything now has gone up in price. And that's why my book is called Capital Offence, because central banks are able to take your capital from you without your permission. You do not vote for a federal bank, the head of the Federal Reserve.
Right.
It's an appointed position. So when government takes your capital via taxation, we can vote for that, or we can lend them our capital through treasury bonds or whatever. But the third way they obtain capital is by printing money, and it's without your permission. And so I
Okay.
think this is very wrong. Now, when they print money through a method called quantitative easing, and we can talk about that if you're interested, but effectively what it does is drive asset prices higher. And again, it's through something called the portfolio effect, which the former Fed chair Ben Bernanke used to talk about all the time.
Okay.
So a real wealth effect, let's go back a second. A real wealth effect is when people like you and me are making bikes and suits and creating capital, and the profit of our company is going up because we're creating so much capital. And as our profit goes up, we can hire more people and we can pay them more so that our employees are benefiting. We're reinvesting capital in our business, making better bikes, better suits. Our customers are benefiting. They're getting wowed. They continue to buy our products and more of them. So as our profit goes up, our share price goes up. And if you have hundreds or thousands of companies in the economy or in the stock market all increasing their capital, that pushes the share prices up and pushes the stock market up. That is a real wealth effect. And so when people who own those stocks in their portfolios, they feel wealthier because they are wealthier, because there's more capital being produced. And so then they go spend more money. That's a good outcome. The fake wealth effect is instead of stock markets being driven higher through the creative process, central banks will take interest rates to zero or print money to buy assets to drive the prices higher
Yeah.
and hope that it drags the economy up with them. Right? So when they drive prices higher, the stock market's higher through zero interest rates or printing money, there's no more capital in the system. It just means that you've got to pay more for the same capital that was being produced. And so it's a fake wealth effect. It's not real. And when you print money, it obviously results in inflation, which is much higher than authorities will tell you it is, by the way.
Yeah.
And it distorts the economy. And I in my book I go through this step by step, like one
Yeah.
chapter at a time, very slowly. I'm cutting corners here, but I use analogies and stories so you will understand. And the reason I wrote the book is because I think that, the average person is very smart, particularly when it comes to deciding what it is they should be doing with their own hard-earned capital.
Right.
You know how much of your capital that you should save and how much you should spend. You don't need
Right.
a policymaker telling you that you're not spending enough of your money.
No one's going to tell me that.
No, and neither does anybody else.
Right.
And they don't need to be told what they should be paying for a house or what they should be paying for a stock. People are smart enough to make those decisions on their own. But policymakers try to force people into certain behavior for the short-term benefit of GDP or gross domestic product.
Right.
All that is a measure of all final spending in an economy. And
Well,
so they
yeah.
don't care if you're driving GDP higher by creating capital and then spending that or taking on debt and spending that.
Okay. Well, so why don't we talk about that a little bit? I love the way you break complex ideas into simple so that we can understand them of actually what the inflation really means and why it's bad as far as the devaluation of our actual money that we think we have. And also, can you touch upon why free money isn't free and with all these like bailouts and things like that, economy suffers?
Sure. So, money is only free for those who receive it.
Right.
It comes at great cost to everybody else. And you really only have to remind yourself that nothing comes from nothing. They want to believe in this something for nothing fairy tale that you can conjure up wealth out of nothing. You cannot. If you receive or obtain wealth without first creating it, then that wealth that you have obtained comes at somebody else's expense. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. The only thing is you can't actually see who it is that's getting screwed because you obtained wealth unfairly.
Ah,
And so the example I use, I have two chapters in my book on housing. So the Fed, in my opinion, tried to create a wealth effect in housing starting in the early 2000s. And we had that housing bubble, right, that
Oh,
peaked in
yeah.
06, 07. And a couple of market commentators like Paul Krugman from the New York Times and Paul McCulley from PIMCO were recommending that the Fed create a wealth effect through housing because we were just coming out of that dot-com crash, right? And it was
Right.
a negative wealth effect of stock markets going down, people feeling less wealthy and spending less money. All right, so let's start running housing because more people own houses, and if the house prices go up, they'll extract equity from their home and spend it,
Right.
effectively consuming their homes. But a home has no business going up in price, which a lot of people don't really think about. And they don't think about it because home prices have always gone up. There was a momentary collapse back in 08, 09. But the reason house prices have no business going up is because they're not creating any capital. So our house, we live in a suburb of Toronto. We bought in 2001. And if we sold it today, we would get 4 times what we paid for it.
Right.
Now, earlier we were talking about you made a bike, I made a suit. It didn't come at anyone. Capital was created, right?
Yeah, that's great
Yeah.
because, but then you wouldn't be able to buy a comparable home at the initial price. You're now having to spend the new price of buying a new home. So it's
Yeah.
not like you're taking that money in.
Well, yeah. So what happens is that if we sold our house, we would get 4 times what we paid for it.
Yeah,
But what was our contribution to society to
right.
justify making 4 times on our home? It was Zippo. We didn't do anything. So if we make 4 times on our home without doing anything to deserve it, like our house didn't start producing 4 times as much stuff. It didn't grow 4 times in size. It's still the same economic good that we bought 24 years ago. But
Yeah,
because of central bank policy of driving interest rates to zero, making mortgages more affordable, not housing, but mortgages more affordable, it served to drive housing prices higher. And so when a young couple or a newcomer to our country, they want to buy the same economic good that we bought, they have to pay 4 times what we paid. So rather than a creation of capital when we make 4 times on our home, there's a redistribution of capital from the
oh,
younger couple's bank account into our bank account. And it's not fair. And I mean, the housing is starting to get bad in the States in terms of affordability for younger people. It's much, much worse here in Canada and in
really?
Australia, like really bad. And so for a lot of younger people, like for instance, we're about 30 years up until 2001. In Canada, the average house price was about 7 times the average income. So it was after tax income. So it was affordable. It's now 12 times,
I see. Yeah. So
right?
for
So,
young families to buy a starter house is almost unaffordable. Like where I used to live in California, same thing, really expensive.
mhm.
Compared to where I am now in Eastern Washington, it's slightly more affordable.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's, you know, the, and it, to me, this is a moral issue. Again, I mean, a lot of I'm 63, and, a lot of people my age, when I tell them this story, they get it right away, usually. Every now and then I run into someone who just doesn't like it because they don't want to admit that their gain is coming at somebody else's expense. It's not that any of us have done anything wrong. We haven't
Yeah.
broken any rules or any laws. We've all played by the rules. But it doesn't alter the fact that we're benefiting at somebody else's expense. And for a lot of young people, it's completely hopeless
To buy a starter home
to
now,
buy
but
a starter home. The average age of the first time home buyer in the States is way higher than it was 20 years ago.
oh yeah, but what is the solution though? Because on the one hand, people are just thinking that was their investment towards their retirement is investing in real estate and with the intention of it appreciating. So I'm
Yeah,
sure there
no.
are people that see it that way as well as an asset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I don't blame them for seeing it that way because that's what policymakers have been telling them for years. And back in the day, I mean, house prices have always grown a little bit faster than general inflation, but nothing like they have recently.
Wow.
And so generally, when you paid off your home, you had your nest egg because you paid it off, not necessarily because this house price went up 4 times in value, right? You paid
Yeah.
off the mortgage, it's like four savings. But this is double jeopardy because not only has it priced the younger generation, for the most part, out of the housing market, but because policymakers encourage people to invest in real estate and expect their house price to go up and rely on that to fund their retirement,
Yeah.
people actually consumed more and saved less because they figure, well, look, I don't have to save as much money because my house is going to be up 4 or 5 times by the time I retire, and I'll use that for my retirement rather than savings. So there was less saving and investment in the economy than there otherwise would have been if people were not relying on their house price to go through the roof to fund their retirement. And so productivity growth and capital creation in the economy would have been much higher today than it otherwise would have been because
Yeah.
people rely. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place now, where especially politicians and central bankers, they don't want house prices to fall back to affordable levels because then that will ruin the retirement of a lot of baby boomers
Yeah.
who are relying on that for their retirement. But then you screw the next generation and they can't buy a house. And so there's no easy way out of this. Um,
I was hoping you had like some good news to leave us with about like a solution. Like, what about Bitcoin? Can that come along and save the day? I mean, what is the answer?
there's no easy way out.
Nothing.
There's
Nothing.
no there is no easy way out. And I talk about this in my book. It doesn't mean that there's no way out. It just means that
Okay.
there's no easy way out.
Got it.
And I think the first step is for all of us to stop believing in the something for nothing myth,
Okay.
for all baby boomers to admit that yes, making money on our home is coming at somebody else's expense. It's not because of our brilliance and we have great timing in real estate. Oh, well done, Musson. You really no, it's nonsense. I just happened to be older and bought my house right when central banks really started targeting a wealth effect in housing. So first, we need to have that conversation. And it's not demonizing anybody. Don't demonize baby boomers because they made a lot of money on their homes.
Yeah.
And most people, I would argue the vast majority of people my age, never even really thought about the fact that they were benefiting at somebody else's expense. But when you
Yeah.
point it out to them, they typically get it right away. Then we need to have central banks stop distorting interest rates to drive asset prices higher and stop bailing out Wall Street when they make bad decisions. When
Right.
you keep bailing out bad decision making, it encourages even more bad decision making, even more risk taking, because the system knows that the Fed will come to their rescue by printing money, which comes at the
Right.
expense of the real economy, which I go through sort of in depth, again, step by step, why exactly that is. And so if you get central banks out of the equation in terms of artificially driving asset prices higher, housing prices will come down. And I would love to see that happen. I would love to see my home price go down to the price I paid for it 20 years ago, because then that would mean that young people would be able to afford a home and start a family.
But
And
not everybody's going to think that way. I mean,
no,
with
they won't. And I understand. No, I
with
understand.
society where people have already invested in their real estate and they're already planning on that.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand that. Um, but it's like I've used an analogy where let's say I'm your neighbor.
Yeah.
You go away on vacation. And when you're gone, I have a swimming pool put in my backyard, but now my kids don't have any grass to play on.
Yeah.
So I moved my fence 3/4 of the way across your backyard.
Ooh, I wouldn't
Eh,
like that.
Yeah, so you come home and say, "What the hell's going on here?" I said, "Well, we had a pool put in, and we didn't have any grass, so my kids need grass to play on, so I moved the fence over." And then you say, "Yeah, but that's my lawn." I said, "Well, where the hell are my kids going to play?" You know, it doesn't really make sense for people my age to say, "Well, how the hell am I going to retire? If prices go back down to what I paid for it." Well,
Yeah.
it's coming at somebody else's expense.
Yeah, I see that. I mean,
Yeah.
I really do, but it's such a short podcast. Is there any possible like good note you want to leave people on about positive about the economy and where we
Yeah.
can find you and stuff?
Yeah. So in the end of my book, I have sort of the 10 steps for reform, if you will. And I think we're going to do it.
Oh, good.
And there's the law of holes where, if you find yourself in a hole, the first rule is to stop digging. And right now we're still digging and we're digging faster, which is, going to make the cure even worse, but we can do it. And especially America, when everybody in your country decides, okay, we're all in this together, we're going to do this. I mean, it's amazing what the patriotism and the camaraderie and this can-do spirit. And it's
Yeah,
going to be tough, but people will do it if they believe that we're all in this together and it's not just me that's going to be suffering and these
yeah,
people are going to be fine. No, it's got to be real, it's got to be true, it's got to be honest, and they have to be able to trust policymakers. And I think we can get there. And I'll finish off with, there's a line that says, um, the people always get the government that they deserve, which, in other words, you voted them in, so don't complain. But that's only true if people really understand what's going on.
yeah,
And I don't think people actually do understand what's going on and why life has become so difficult. And so it's easy to fall for the easy answers. And so, with an understanding what's really happening, empowering people with knowledge, truth, and understanding, and compassion, by the way, then people will demand different actions by policymakers. And then the policymakers will do the right thing. They're not bad people. But doing the right thing today would be political suicide because nobody understands why they're doing it,
yeah.
because they want all the freebies.
Well, thanks for shedding light on the situation that so few people really understand about the economy and the negative effects of inflation and spending and digging a hole, things like that.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's been great to meet you.
And where can people find you, your book, your blog, all the things?
Yeah, so my book, no, Capital Offence, Why Some
Yeah,
Benefit at Your Expense, you can find it on Amazon.com,
yeah,
and Barnes and Noble and Thrift Books. I think there are others. And I have a free blog. It's called Paulitical Economy. So it's my first name, Paul, Paulitical Economy. So you go to pauliticaleconomy.com and you just put your email in and you get a free weekly post, sort of my ranting and raving, but also trying to distill things and keep things simple, help people understand what's going on, and try to have a bit of fun with it. And then my social media is typically Paddington Cap. So PA, like Paddington the bear,
uh-huh.
Paddington Cap, CAP. And yeah, and people can reach out to me on my website and email me and ask me questions and be happy to answer them.
Well, Paul Musson at Paddington Capital, thank you for being a great guest on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Lisa. It's been great.